The year was 2387. Space was quiet. It was always quiet. But the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl, the kind that sat on your chest like a stone and refused to move. The kind of quiet that came right before something terrible happened. Deep in Sector 7 Omega, a small mining colony floated in the dark between two dying stars. The colony was called Ironhold Station, a rusted, spinning ring of metal and hope, home to about 4,000 human civilians. Miners, engineers, families, children. People who had come out to the edge of the galaxy not for glory, but for a paycheck and a better life. The station commander was a woman named Lieutenant Sarah Voss, 34 years old, sharp eyes, short brown hair, and a scar on her jaw from a mining drill accident when she was 19. She wasn't military. She had a basic weapons license and a station security team of 12 people. That was it. That was all Ironhold had. Sarah was sitting in the command room drinking cold coffee when the proximity alarms went off. Not one alarm. Not two. Every single alarm on the station screamed at the same time. "What is that?" she said, standing up so fast her coffee flew across the console. Her technician, a young man named Derek Olson, spun around in his chair with wide white eyes. His face had gone completely pale. His hands were shaking. "Commander," Derek said slowly, like the words were too heavy to carry, we have a fleet on long-range sensors." "How many ships?" Sarah asked, walking fast to his console. Sarah leaned over Derek's shoulder and looked at the screen. She counted once. She counted twice. She counted a third time because she was sure she was making a mistake. She wasn't making a mistake. "Derek," she said quietly, "that number can't be right." Derek swallowed hard. "It is right, Commander. I checked 3 times already." There were 2,400 warships on that screen. All of them heading directly toward Ironhold Station. All of them flying under the black and red banner of the Vreth Dominion, the most aggressive, most feared military power in the known galaxy. A civilization that had been conquering systems for 600 years. A civilization that did not take prisoners. A civilization that did not negotiate. A civilization that destroyed everything it touched and moved on like a fire through dry grass. Sarah straightened up slowly. She felt the cold move through her chest. "Sound the evacuation alarm," she said. "And open every emergency communication channel we have. Everything. Send it all." "To whom?" Derek asked. "Everyone," Sarah said. "The Alliance. The Coalition. Earth Command. Every relay station between here and the core systems is operational. Send the SOS." Derek nodded and his fingers flew across the keyboard. Within 30 seconds the signal was broadcasting. Bouncing off relay satellites. Punching through subspace channels. Screaming across the galaxy in every direction. "Ironhold Station, Sector 7 Omega, under imminent attack. Vreth Dominion Fleet, 2,400 vessels, requesting immediate military assistance. All frequencies, SOS." And then they waited. The Vreth fleet moved slowly, almost lazily. Like a predator that already knew its prey had nowhere to run. They were still 6 hours out. 6 hours was enough time for a response. 6 hours was enough time for someone, anyone, to answer. Sarah stood at the window of the command room and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, that signal was traveling at the speed of light. Somewhere out there, someone was hearing it. Someone was reading it. Someone was making a decision. HFY, Sarah whispered to herself, a phrase she had picked up from an old Earth story her grandfather used to tell her. From this moment on, everything changes. Her grandfather had always said it when life reached a turning point. When the road split, you had to choose a direction. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she was right. Everything was about to change. Not just for Ironhold. Not just for Sector 7 Omega. For the entire galaxy. The first hour passed. Nothing came back. Sarah told herself that was normal. Subspace communication had delays. Relays took time. Command centers had protocols, a chain of command, and all the bureaucratic machinery that operated slowly even in emergencies. The second hour passed. Still nothing. Sarah started pacing. Derek kept refreshing the communication console, as if refreshing it faster would make something appear. The rest of the security team stood around the command room with their rifles and their nervous eyes, checking the sensor feeds, watching the Vreth fleet crawl closer. The third hour passed. Sarah sat down in her command chair and folded her hands and stared at the floor. "They heard us," Derek said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. The signal was strong. The relays were working. He had confirmed the transmission 6 separate times. "They heard us," Sarah agreed. So why? Because of where we are, said a voice from the doorway. Both Sarah and Derek turned. Standing in the doorway was Admiral Gordon Hayes, retired. 71 years old. White hair, deep lines in his face, and a prosthetic left hand from a battle 30 years ago that he never talked about. He was a civilian resident of Ironhold, had been living quietly on the station for 4 years, keeping to himself, tending a small hydroponic garden in the residential ring, and playing chess with anyone patient enough to sit with him. Most people on the station didn't even know who he used to be. Sarah knew. Admiral, she said carefully. Gordon walked into the room slowly, leaning on his cane. He looked at the sensor screen for a long moment, studying the fleet the way a man reads a book he has read before. His expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. Sector 7 Omega, he said finally. No strategic value. No rare minerals worth protecting anymore, the good veins played out 3 years ago. No political significance. No powerful lobby back on Earth or in the Alliance Senate who cares what happens to 4,000 mining workers on a rusted station. He paused. And 2,400 Vreth warships. Any fleet we sent would be outnumbered 10 to 1. No commander in the Alliance wants that fight. So they're leaving us to die, Derek said. Gordon looked at the young man steadily. They're making a calculation, he said. That's what command does. It makes calculations. He paused again. Sometimes the calculations are wrong. What do we do? Sarah asked. Gordon pulled up a chair slowly and sat down in front of the communication console. He reached out with his real hand, the right one still steady even at 71, and started typing. What are you doing? Sarah asked. There's one more channel, Gordon said. One channel that isn't part of the standard emergency network. Most people don't know it exists. He kept typing without looking up. It's not for fleets. It's not for battalions. It's a very specific frequency, on a very specific encryption key, that goes to a very specific place. Where? Derek asked. Gordon finished typing. His finger hovered over the send key for just a moment. Then he pressed it. Caro, he said quietly, the old soldier's word for it begins now, there is no going back. He had used it the first time in a battle 30 years ago. He had not expected to use it again. Where does that frequency go? Sarah pressed. Gordon turned and looked at her. His eyes were calm. Completely, almost unnervingly calm. It goes, he said, to the only thing in this galaxy that the Vreth Dominion has ever been afraid of. While Gordon's message traveled through its secret channel, the Vreth fleet continued its approach. Inside the lead command vessel, a black dreadnought 3 kilometers long called the Undying Verdict, the Vreth Supreme Commander, stood before a holographic display of Ironhold Station. His name was Vreth VII, named for 6 generals before him, each more brutal than the last. He was tall, gray-skinned, with 4 arms and compound yellow eyes that never fully closed. He wore a cloak made from the flags of 19 conquered civilizations stitched together. His second-in-command, a smaller Vreth officer named Skell, stood beside him. Humans again, Skell said, studying the station. Small settlement. No military vessels in range. The SOS signal was sent, but we have intercepted no response from any Alliance fleet. He tilted his head. The usual outcome. They are abandoned. Shall we proceed? We proceed, Vreth said. His voice was deep and flat, like stone grinding on stone. Ironhold falls by morning. Skell paused. Only for a second. But Vreth noticed. Speak, Vreth said. I have been reviewing the historical files on human engagements, Skell said carefully. As standard pre-battle protocol. And? Skell brought up a file on the holographic display. A long list of battles. Dates. Locations. Outcomes. Vreth scanned it quickly, disinterested. But then Skell zoomed in on a particular section. A section highlighted in red. A section marked with the Vreth symbol that meant classified, high command only. Vreth went still. Where did you access this information? Vreth asked slowly. I have high command clearance, Skell said. Sector commander level. Vreth stared at the highlighted files for a long moment. The names in that section were not battle names. They were incident names. And every single one of those incidents shared one common factor. Single human operative. Unknown designation. Engagement classified. 17 incidents. 17 times in the past 40 years, the Vreth Dominion had encountered something that wasn't a fleet. Wasn't a battalion. Wasn't even a squad. Something alone. The outcomes of those 17 incidents were all the same. The Vreth forces involved had been destroyed. Completely. Not defeated, destroyed. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of hardware. And whatever had been done, it was simply left. No demands. No territory claimed. No message sent. Just gone. This is mythology, Vorik said finally. Battle propaganda. Humans spread fear stories about their capabilities. It is a documented tactic. Of course, Skell agreed quickly. I only raise it because the classification level on these files is. We have 2,400 warships, Vorik said firmly, turning back to the display of Ironhold Station. We proceed. Skell said nothing more. But that night, alone in his quarters, Skell pulled up those 17 files again. He read every single one. Every fragmented report. Every panicked last transmission. Every piece of wreckage analysis. He read them all. And then he sat in the dark for a very long time, very quietly, unable to sleep. The message Gordon sent reached its destination in 47 minutes. There was no base. No headquarters. No fleet command center. The signal went to a single receiver, a small dark object drifting in the outer edge of Sector 9 like a piece of forgotten debris. To every sensor in the galaxy it looked like a dead rock. A piece of asteroid. Nothing worth looking at. Inside that object, a single light blinked on. A pair of eyes opened in the dark. His name, the name on his military record, the name that exactly 4 people in the entire galaxy knew, was Sergeant First Class Marcus Cole. He was 43 years old. Black hair going gray at the temples. A jaw like a block of stone. Eyes the color of deep water, dark blue, very still, the kind of eyes that had seen so much that they had simply stopped reacting to things that would make other people flinch. He read Gordon's message once. Then he looked at the attached sensor data from Ironhold. The fleet size. The approach vector. The timeline. He sat with it for about 30 seconds. Then he got up. The inside of his ship, if you could call it a ship, was small. Barely bigger than a large closet. Every surface was covered in equipment. Not the clean, organized equipment of a standard military vessel. Something different. Something that had been modified and rebuilt and modified again so many times that it barely resembled anything that had come out of any factory. Weapons systems with no official designation number. Armor panels made from materials that weren't supposed to exist in combinations that weren't supposed to work. Computing cores running software that Earth Command had officially never developed and would officially never acknowledge. Marcus Cole was not a fleet. He was not a battalion. He was what happened when humanity decided that sometimes, the answer to an impossible problem was not more soldiers. It was one perfect soldier. The program had no official name in any document that any government had ever published. Among the 12 people who had worked on it over 20 years, most of them now dead or retired, it was called simply The Answer. Marcus pulled on his armor. It took 4 minutes. Piece by piece the suit came together. Matte black, no insignia, no rank markers. The helmet sealed with a soft sound. His HUD came online. His suit's intelligence, an AI he had never given a name, began calculating approach vectors, fleet formations, weapons loadouts. He looked at the data one more time. 2,400 ships. HFY, Marcus said quietly. His voice was calm. Completely calm. The way a river is calm on the surface when all the power is underneath. He sat down in the pilot's seat. His ship's engine, silent, invisible to all standard detection methods, came online. He set course for Sector 7 Omega. He did not call Ironhold back. He did not send a message to Gordon. He did not send a message to Earth Command. He just flew. Back on Ironhold, the 5th hour had come and gone. Sarah had organized the evacuation as best she could. The station had 11 emergency pods, each one holding 40 people. That was 440 spots. The station had 4,000 residents. The math was brutal and everyone could see it. Sarah had made the decision that no commander ever wanted to make. Children first. Then elderly. Then mothers with infants. Pod after pod launched into the dark, carrying the most vulnerable away from the station as fast as the launch systems could cycle. But the pods were slow. And the Vreth fleet was still coming. In the residential ring, families had gathered in the common areas. Some people were crying quietly. Some were just sitting, holding each other, not saying anything. Some, the miners, mostly the ones who had spent their lives doing dangerous work and had developed a particular relationship with fear, were playing cards and drinking coffee and making dark jokes. Tommy Reyes, 9 years old, red hair, missing his 2 front teeth, sat with his mother Linda Reyes in the common area of Level 4. Linda had her arm around Tommy's shoulders and was staring at nothing, her jaw tight, her eyes dry. She had already used up her tears somewhere around hour 3. "Mom," Tommy said. "Yeah, baby. Is someone coming?" Linda didn't answer right away. She pulled him a little closer. "I don't know," she said. She had decided a long time ago never to lie to Tommy about important things. "I really don't know." Tommy thought about this for a moment with the particular seriousness that 9-year-olds bring to heavy things. Grandpa used to say, Tommy said, that humans always send someone, even when everyone says they can't. He said, "That's just what we do." Linda looked down at her son. She felt something tighten in her throat. "Your grandpa was an intelligent man," she said. Upstairs in the command room, Gordon Hayes was sitting very still, watching the communication console. His chess pieces were still in his jacket pocket. He always carried them, but he hadn't taken them out. His hands were folded on the table. Sarah came and stood beside him. "How long?" she asked quietly. "He'll be here before they are," Gordon said. "How can you be sure?" Gordon looked at her. "Because I know him," he said simply. "I trained him." Sarah stared at the old admiral for a long moment. She had 100 questions. She chose the most important one. Is one person, actually going to make a difference against 2,400 warships? Gordon was quiet for a moment. "The last time Marcus Cole was deployed," he said carefully, "it was against a Vreth garrison force of 300 ships that had occupied a colony world. He went in alone. When it was over, there were no Vreth ships left. The colony was intact. Not one civilian was harmed." Sarah blinked. "That's not possible?" Gordon said. "No, it isn't. By every calculation anyone has ever run, it isn't possible." He paused. "And yet." Marcus came out of dark space travel 40,000 kilometers from Ironhold. He ran a full scan immediately. The Vreth fleet was spread across a wide formation, the standard Vreth approach pattern, designed to surround and cut off all escape vectors simultaneously. It was a well-designed formation. It had worked against dozens of civilizations. Marcus spent 11 seconds studying it. Then he identified the 17 structural weaknesses in the formation and ranked them by order of impact. He opened a channel to Ironhold Station. Gordon's face appeared on his small screen immediately. The old man had clearly been sitting at that console for hours. "Marcus," Gordon said. "Gordon," Marcus replied. "Status. 4,000 civilians, 11 pods launched, and about 360 people evacuated so far. Fleet is 1 hour out from weapons range. I need you to keep the remaining pods launching on schedule. Don't stop for any reason. Don't watch what happens outside. Just keep launching." Gordon nodded slowly. "Understood." "One more thing," Marcus said. "Yes." "Tell them not to be afraid." Gordon looked at the screen for a moment. Something moved in his old eyes, something warm and deep. "I will," he said. Marcus closed the channel. He turned to face the Vreth fleet on his display. 2,400 ships. The largest military force, the Vreth Dominion, had committed to a single operation in 11 years. "Caro," he said quietly. He pushed his ship to full speed and flew directly at the center of the fleet. On the Vreth flagship, every alarm went off at once. Skell scrambled to the sensor console. "Single vessel," he reported, reading fast. "Small. Human configuration. No fleet accompaniment. He stopped. "Report," Vorik said sharply. "It's heading straight for us," Skell said. "Single vessel. Heading straight for the center of our formation at maximum speed." He paused. "It's not stopping." The bridge was silent. Vorik stared at the sensor display. One tiny dot moving through the space between 2,400 warships. "Target it," Vorik said. "All forward batteries, fire." The order went out across the fleet. Weapon systems that could reduce a small moon to rubble opened fire on a single small ship. The results were unexpected. Marcus didn't dodge. Dodging was for pilots who needed distance and hesitation to survive. He flew into the weapons fire. His ship's defense system, something that had taken 12 engineers 11 years to build and that officially did not exist, didn't block the energy blasts. It redirected them. The incoming weapons fire bent around the hull of his ship like water around a stone and then continued on, back into the fleet. The first 60 seconds of the battle were entirely one-sided. Vreth ships were destroying each other. By the time Vorik understood what was happening, Marcus had already slipped through the outer formation and was inside the fleet, surrounded on all sides, deep in the middle of 2,400 enemy vessels, exactly where any rational tactical mind would say you should never be. Marcus was not thinking about survival. He was thinking about the people on Ironhold Station. He was thinking about Tommy Reyes and his mother and the other 3,600 people who hadn't made it onto an evacuation pod yet. He opened his own weapons systems. What Marcus Cole carried was not standard military hardware. It was the product of 20 years of classified research into what humans called asymmetric force multiplication, the science of making one thing hit like 10,000 things. His weapons didn't fire in straight lines. They fired in patterns, spreading, branching, self-targeting chains of energy that could pass through empty space and adjust their flight paths based on real-time calculations. In the first 3 minutes, he disabled 47 ships. Not destroyed. Disabled. Their engines dead, their weapons offline, drifting helplessly in space. Marcus didn't like killing unless it was absolutely necessary. He was precise. He was surgical. He was the opposite of the Vreth way of war, which was total destruction, and that precision was itself a kind of weapon, because it meant that every ship that drifted disabled added to the chaos in the formation. Dead ships created obstacles. Obstacles forced other ships to maneuver. Maneuvering in a tight formation under combat conditions caused collisions, miscommunications, friendly fire. He was not fighting 2,400 ships. He was making 2,400 ships fight each other. On the Ironhold command room, Gordon watched the sensor feed with Sarah beside him. Neither of them spoke. The display showed the Vreth formation, which had been a clean, organized arc of firepower 2 hours ago, beginning to fold inward on itself in a spreading ripple of chaos, with one tiny dot moving through it like a needle through cloth. "My God," Derek whispered. "Keep launching pods," Gordon said quietly. His voice was steady. His eyes never left the screen. 40 minutes into the battle, something changed. Vorik was not a fool. He was brutal and cold, and he had conquered 19 systems, but he was not a fool. He watched his formation collapsing from the inside, and he made a decision that was tactical, ruthless, and entirely correct from a military standpoint. He split the fleet. 2/3 of his ships maintained their positions around Marcus, enough to continue keeping him occupied. The remaining 800 ships broke away from the engagement and resumed their course toward Ironhold Station. Marcus saw it immediately. His AI calculated the arrival time of the breakaway force against the remaining evacuation time at Ironhold. The numbers didn't work. He had 230 people left on the station who hadn't reached pods yet. The 800 ships would reach weapons range in 19 minutes. At their current launch rate, Ironhold needed 26 minutes to complete the evacuation. 7 minutes short. For the first time in the engagement, Marcus felt something that wasn't calculation. It was heavier than the calculation. It sat in his chest, and it had no tactical solution. He thought about Tommy Reyes. He didn't know Tommy Reyes's name. Furthermore, he didn't know anything about the people on that station except that they were human beings who had gone out to the edge of the galaxy to live their lives and had ended up in the path of something terrible through no fault of their own. SCI-FI, Marcus said. He made a decision that his AI immediately flagged as tactically inadvisable. It flagged it 4 times. He dismissed the flag 4 times. He broke off from the main fleet engagement. He left 1,600 ships behind him, still tangled in the chaos he had created, fighting each other, drifting and colliding, and he went after 800. He was leaving his back completely unprotected. On the Vreth flagship, Skell watched Marcus change course and felt something cold move through him. "He's going after the breakaway force," he said. "And leaving his rear exposed," Vorik said. "Order the main fleet to pursue. He can't fight in 2 directions." But Skell was still staring at the screen. "I'm still watching that one tiny dot racing toward 800 warships. 17 incidents," he thought. 17 times. And we still don't learn. Marcus hit the breakaway fleet like a lightning strike. 800 ships were approaching. He had 14 minutes before they reached Ironhold's weapons range. He didn't fight them the same way he had fought the main fleet. With the main fleet he had used time and misdirection. He didn't have the opportunity now. He used something else. In the secret files that Skell had been looking at, the ones labeled with the Vreth symbol for high command only, there was a common phrase in the incomplete battle reports from those 17 incidents. It showed up in 11 of the 17 reports, always in the last messages from the Vreth commanders who had encountered him. The phrase was, "It is not fighting like a soldier. It is fighting like a wall." The Vreth had no equivalent concept. In the Vreth military philosophy, defense was a temporary state between attacks. You protected yourself only long enough to strike again. The idea of something that would simply refuse to move, refuse to yield, or refuse to be pushed back no matter what force was applied, that was not a military concept to them. It was something closer to a natural phenomenon, like trying to fight a mountain. Marcus put himself between the 800 ships and Ironhold Station, and he did not move. The 800 ships opened fire. Everything they had. Marcus's redirected defense system worked at a level it had never been tested at before. His AI was running calculations faster than it had ever run them. His ship's hull temperature was rising into ranges that the engineers who built it had labeled a theoretical maximum, not recommended. He held. Back on Ironhold, the last 230 people were moving through the corridors toward the remaining pods. Sarah was standing at the pod bay entrance, counting heads, grabbing people by the arm and pulling them forward. Derek was at the launch console, cycling pods out as fast as the system allowed. One tiny vessel that refused to give ground was holding back 800 Vreth ships, as the sensors indicated. "He's buying us time," Derek said, his voice cracking. "Don't talk," Sarah said. "Count. Keep moving." In the residential corridor, Linda Reyes was running with Tommy's hand in hers. Tommy ran without complaining, without crying, his small legs working as fast as they could, his eyes wide and serious. "Mom," Tommy said between breaths. "Continue to run, baby." "Someone came, didn't they?" Linda didn't answer. She just ran. 12 minutes in, Marcus's hull temperature hit critical. His AI gave him an option. One option. To redirect power from weapons to cooling systems. To ease the heat. To buy his ship a few more minutes before structural failure. The trade-off was that his defense redirection system would drop to 40% capacity, which meant 40% of the incoming weapons fire would hit the station behind him. He declined the option. His hull kept heating. 11 minutes. 200 Vreth ships were still firing continuously. The other 600 Vreth ships were surrounding him, attempting to flank him and discover an unprotected angle. Marcus's AI was tracking 600 individual movement vectors and adjusting his position in real time, constantly, so that no angle was ever unprotected. His hands were steady on the controls. Inside his helmet, he couldn't see Ironhold. He could only see the Vreth fleet in front of him and the sensor data behind him showing the evacuation status. His AI was feeding him both feeds simultaneously, a constant stream of numbers. Pods launching. People loading. Numbers going down. 230 are to evacuate. Now 190. Now 140. Come on, he thought. It wasn't a tactical calculation. It was just a human thought. The simplest one. Come on. His hull temperature hit the level his engineers had labeled as do not exceed. He stayed where he was. 100. 80. 60. On the Vreth flagship, which had now caught up to the engagement, Vorik stood before his display watching something he had never seen in 40 years of combat command. A single vessel, alone, holding back 800 warships. Not winning. Not destroying them. Just holding. Refusing to break. Refusing to move. "What is it doing?" one of his bridge officers said, genuinely confused. Vorik stared at the display for a long time without answering. He understood, finally, in a way he had never understood before in all his centuries of Vreth military education, what that phrase in the classified files meant. Fighting like a wall. Not because it had been ordered to. Not because it had calculated that holding was the most efficient tactic. Because there were people behind it. 40. 20. 10. Last pod away, Sarah's voice came through on the station channel, and Marcus heard something break open in her voice, relief and grief and exhaustion all at once. "The last pod is away. The station is clear." Marcus closed his eyes inside his helmet for exactly 1 second. "Caro," he said. Then he moved. The moment Ironhold Station was clear, Marcus stopped being a wall. What happened in the next 8 minutes was never fully reconstructed by any analyst. The sensor data existed, fragments of it, from Vreth ships that survived and from Ironhold's own recording systems. But it was so dense, so fast, so layered with overlapping events that no one could ever put together a complete picture. What they could piece together was this. Marcus Cole, in a single overheated ship with weapon systems running at emergency capacity, turned to face 2,000 combined Vreth vessels, the 800 from the breakaway force and the 1,200 that had pursued him from the main engagement, and he stopped running and stopped holding and started moving. Not in a straight line. Not in any pattern that matched standard combat flight. Something different. The Vreth sensor operators who were watching in real time described something in their post-battle reports using a word that translated roughly as inevitable. He moved through the fleet the way a thought moves through a mind, not fighting the resistance. Going around it. Going through the gaps. Going where the fleet wasn't, faster than the fleet could close the gaps. His weapons, now no longer in defensive redirect mode, fired in all directions simultaneously, the self-targeting chains finding their marks through the chaos. 100 ships were disabled in the first 2 minutes. Their drifting hulls added to the chaos. 200 by minute 4. The formation had completely lost its shape. The ships were pulling back, trying to create distance and find angles. But everywhere they moved, they discovered either Marcus or their own disabled fleet members. By minute 6, the battle had stopped looking like a battle. It looked like a controlled demolition. It was as if someone had decided very precisely which pieces of a structure to remove and in which order, so that the whole thing would fall inward on itself without spreading damage outward. Vreth was standing at his bridge window watching it happen. His voice, for the first time in 40 years of command, had left him. He had no orders to give. Every order he gave was already obsolete by the time his fleet could act on it. Skell stood beside him. He said nothing. He had known. He had read the files. He had known. By minute 8, 1 small ship and 2,000 Vreth vessels, Vreth made the only decision left to him. He ordered a full retreat. The Vreth fleet pulled back into dark space travel and disappeared in less than 4 minutes. The way they moved, fast, disorganized, some ships barely waiting for their jump calculations to complete, was not the movement of a military force executing a strategic withdrawal. It was the movement of something that had been frightened. The battle space around Ironhold went quiet. Disabled Vreth ships drifted in slow circles, their crews alive and unharmed, waiting for rescue. Marcus had been precise, always precise, never using more force than necessary. Marcus sat in his pilot's seat for a long moment without moving. His hull was still hot. Half his systems were showing warning lights. His hands inside his gauntlets were aching. He hadn't noticed during the fight. He opened the channel to Ironhold. Sarah's face appeared. Her eyes were red. Her jaw was tight. She had clearly been crying, not dramatically, not messily, just quietly, the kind of crying that happens when you've been holding yourself together for 6 hours and then suddenly don't have to anymore. All 4,000 accounted for? Marcus asked. All 4,000, Sarah said. Her voice was steady but barely. No casualties. Not one. Marcus nodded slowly. Who are you? Sarah asked. What do I even call you? You don't need to call me anything, Marcus said. You don't need to put the incident in any official report. Today, a mining colony faced an attack, but we successfully evacuated it. That's the report. Sarah stared at him. That's not. That's the report, he said. Not unkindly. Safer for you. Safer for the next 4,000 people somewhere else who might need the same thing and require it to still be possible. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Thank you. I don't know what else to say but, thank you. Marcus looked at her through the screen for a moment. Tell the people on those pods that they did well, he said. Tell them that they kept their heads and they moved when they needed to move, and that's what saved them. He paused. They saved themselves. I just made sure they had enough time to do it. He cut the channel. In one of the evacuation pods, floating in the dark between the stars, Tommy Reyes sat pressed against the small porthole window looking out at the space where the battle had been. The stars were still there. Calm and cold and permanent the way they always were. There was no sign of anything that had just happened. Just space, clean and quiet. Mom, Tommy said. Linda was beside him, her arm around his shoulders, her eyes closed, breathing slowly. Yeah, baby. Someone did come, he said. Linda opened her eyes and looked at the stars. She thought about her father, who had told her the same thing her son had repeated back to her. Humans always send someone. She had never been entirely sure she believed it. She had believed it as a child, the way you believe what your family tells you because the world is still simple and good things seem possible. She was 32 years old, and she had spent 6 hours in the darkest fear of her life. HFY, she said softly. Currently, everything changes. She didn't know where she had heard that phrase. It had just come to her, as things do when you stand at the edge of something and then step back. What does that mean? Tommy asked. Linda pulled him closer. It means we're okay, she said. It means we're going to be okay. Something porthole, a single dark ship moved silently through the stars, heading away from Ironhold, heading toward whatever came next, carrying one man and no flag and no name that anyone would ever put in a history book. The stars didn't mark where it had been. Space closed behind it like water closes behind a swimmer. But 4,000 people were alive. And somewhere out there, in the fleet that had run, in the command centers of the Vreth Dominion, in the war rooms of a civilization that had been conquering for 600 years, something had changed. Something had shifted. Like a stone moved in a foundation. Not visible yet. But there. Gordon Hayes sat alone in the command room of Ironhold Station, the station quiet around him now, and he opened his jacket pocket and took out his chess pieces and set them one by one on the table in front of him. He didn't set up a game. He just placed them, all 32 pieces, in a circle. He looked at them for a long time. Then he smiled. Just slightly. The smile of a man who had known, all along, exactly what the answer was. Clapperboard the end.